how satisfied is the typical user of the court system? Not very. Why? I've met some of your judges this morning. They're real nice folks. and most of the clerks are really nice, right? Kelly in the ADR office is really sweet. Depends if they win, somebody said, right? I look at it this way. I figure, I'm not great at math, but I figure if I can calculate it this way, if 1/2 of all the people who go in there to trial lose, I figure they're not very happy. And of those that win, I figure half of those folks probably don't get everything that they wanted, leaving them with that compromise feel, or the judge didn't understand that my damages are real and that I deserved all that pain and suffering, or the jury didn't get it. So I figure half the folks or so, some portion of the folks who win, that don't win as much as they thought they should have, also walk away frustrated with the system. That's 3/4. And that's just mathematical. Do you know that the average agreement in mediation, let's talk about this. Those who win, they get what? What do they walk away with when they win?
Money.
Oh, no. I was at the court. I didn't see an ATM machine there. They get a judgment, right? They get a piece of paper, a judgment. How often, and lawyers, y'all tell me, how often once you get that judgment, do you just sort of take that down to the bank and the teller hands you that $150,000? Doesn't work that way? How often do you have to go and spend more resources trying to collect on that judgment? Most of the time? Wow. Okay, so people don't like losing much, I'm gathering, by their reluctance to pay. The average mediated agreement is complied with 95% of the time. Why do you think? Incentive for resolution, okay, because what? They voluntarily agreed to it, yeah?
It cuts their overhead.
Say again?
Cuts their costs.
Cuts their costs, their overhead, sure.
They've been part of the solution.
They're part of the solution. Whose words are on the paper? Theirs. That's why we graceful mediators, who call ourselves facilitators, we say, counsel, how would you like this to read? An attorney says, my client agrees to pay not one more nickel than $15,000. Yes, ma'am. Okay. And this, by the way, no now. We mediators, we don't do this anymore. I take a pen and an agreement form and a yellow pad and say, who's got the best handwriting? And let one of the lawyers do all the drafting. Yeah, my insurance company taught me that. So their words go onto the page. The way they want it said, with the protections in there that they want to have, with the admissions in there, if any, that they want to have, or with absolutely no admission and solely for economic purposes to save resources of further trial in this matter. Whatever they want to say goes in there. So when they look at it and decide, in 30 days, am I going to write that check? They're looking at their own words and their own promise and their own signature. So we have potentially higher satisfaction, and I would almost say mathematically higher, because when they agree, theoretically, they're both agreeing because they want to. I mean, we have to assume that. There's no coercion. There's, sometimes there are outside influences on them, economic and whatnot. But they're agreeing to do something. They're signing off on it. They're complying with it the majority of the time because they agreed to it. In 1993, California, 5 years to trial, only 5. Chief Justice George does a survey and finds that the average user of the court system is just about as satisfied with that experience as they are with their experience with the DMV. True story. He convenes a blue ribbon commission, a panel of 12 or 13 people who traveled the state and did open hearings about how can we improve the satisfaction level of the users of our court system. They traveled the state, they held the public hearings, they sat on the dais with all their name tags and all of that, and at the end of this issued a report. Two things came out of that report. The first you've already heard reference to, it's called Fast Track. Essentially, economic incentive to the courts to move cases through on a timely basis, tied to their trial court funding. And I think judges hate it, but they love it more than they hate it. Is that fair to say? No comment. I don't know what it's like to try a case in Fast Track as compared to when they took forever. You're young enough, you probably don't either. Yeah. So the second thing that came out of that was the decision that if the courts could somehow grab onto this mediation thing that had become so popular in family law and was certainly used in labor negotiations and all of that, and had begun to grab a foothold pre-litigation in some insurance cases, because some big insurers, mostly out of Texas, were turned on to this thing called mediation and were starting to use it with their people, that if the court could somehow be in the business of mediation and people could leave with the potential for a win-win solution, but if nothing else, at least a mutually agreed upon resolution, then their satisfaction level with the courts would be higher. 1994, SB 401 passes. The Senate and the House. Gets signed into law, creates 1775 that authorizes the first judicial mediation programs for cases under $50,000.